On Monday's show of Locked On Hurricanes, we did the state of goaltending for the Carolina Hurricanes, as it looks like they'll be bringing back Pierre Kochetkov and Frederick Anderson for 25-26. Now, for Wednesday's show, well, we're going to move outside of the crease and look at the state of the defense as we have Jacob Slavin and company. Will we see some new faces, or will this be more internal for the Hurricanes?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a good Wednesday show for you as we get to look at the defense as it is right now with the guys who are signed with the Carolina Hurricanes through 25-26. Then is it going to be more of an internal moves for the Hurricanes when addressing the defense, or are they also going external and bringing some other guys in? And if that's the case, who is available for the Hurricanes to sign in free agency this summer? But before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, looking at the defense as of right now for the Carolina Hurricanes, and big things to Puckpedia, the Hurricanes technically have 6 defensemen already lined up for next season for 25-26, taking only $18.037 million of the cap, or 18.9% of the full $95.5 million. Now, Jacob Slavin, he will be entering the first year of his 8-year deal that will pay him $6.395 million AAV every year until the end of the 2032-33 season. We'll be entering with 4 more years left of the 5-year deal of Sean Walker at $3.6 million. Then we have 2 more years of Shane Gostisbehere at $3.2, then 2 more years of Jalen Chatfield at $3 million, and then we go into the last year of the entry-level contract, or the ELC, of Alexander Nikishkin at $925,000, with him being an arbitration rights restricted free agent at the end of the season. And of course, Scott Morrow entering the last year of his ELC at $916,667, also making him an RFA at the end of the season, but he will not be arbitration eligible. So for the most part, if you look at the Hurricanes, if they really feel like it, they don't really have to go and sign a defenseman outside of possibly a 7th D-man if they think that this is their 6th they want to go into next season with. Now, Eric Tulsky was on Ovies and Giglio on the same day they did their exit interviews, and he believes that at least one of the rookie defensemen, meaning Nikishin or Morrow, is going to be possibly in the lineup. He thinks probably more so Nikishin, which would make a lot of sense if that's the case, because you give him a full offseason in Carolina. I know he went back to Russia, but if you give him a full offseason, trade camp, all that stuff, let's see how he does next year. The question mark is, do they go with a second defenseman in Scott Morrow, entering his first real full season with the Carolina Hurricanes? He did get to play some, but not enough to get out of a rookie status when it comes to playing for the Canes. So technically, both Nikishin and Morrow will be rookies technically next season for 25-26, since they have not hit that threshold of not being considered a rookie. So that's kind of the big question of, is do you look past that? But for the most part, though, you do have a good 6, all things considered. Like I said, you got Jacob Slavin entering the first year of his 8-year deal. We all know how good he was. Unfortunately, finished 4th in the Lady Byng, finished 8th in the Norris. Of course, those are different conversations for another day, but you can lean on him as your number 1 defenseman. Obviously, top line makes total sense for the D pairing. Then going from there, who do you kind of slide in on his right side? Because they're not bringing back Burns or Orlov. If this is the defense that they're going with, do you throw a Sean Walker on that top line? Because we did get to see that a little bit in the playoffs, especially the Eastern Conference Final, where it's like, are we seeing kind of a preview with a possible first new D pair next season for the Hurricanes? Is it going to be Slavin, and is it going to be Sean Walker with him? That's kind of the big thing. We've also seen in the past a Jalen Chatfield, Jacob Slavin pairing. Do we possibly see the fast-moving, offensively, a little bit more of offensively minded Jalen Chatfield with Slavin, and that basically gives Slavin the understanding of he doesn't really have to do all that extra much, because you look at what Chatfield can do. He's got the speed. He can score goals. He can back check really quick, and that can let Slavin be more of, playing that defensive style. He doesn't have to pinch as much, and he knows that he's got the speed in Chatfield on his right side. So could we see more of that aspect of a Chatfield Slavin? But like I said, another option is, Slavin with Walker. That wouldn't be bad either. And then going from there, do you, if that's the case, whoever's with Slavin, is it going to be Walker Gossespear again? Walker and Shane Gossespear played pretty well together all season. As the season went along, you saw Walker kind of get more comfortable with system. Shane Gossespear did what he needed to do, fought through some injuries, but he was definitely someone that the Hurricanes were glad to have back in the system, and this time for a full season. Now you give him another whole off season going into his second year with the team. I think he's only going to get better. So you're looking at those four defensemen, at least the guys who went through the full season last year, guys who've been there for a good bit, guys returning like Gossespear. Walker's a new one. But overall, you feel kind of really good for your top four. At least, if you look at the Hurricanes' top four defensemen against the other top four, you feel pretty good where the Carolina Hurricanes are at if those are the four guys you're kind of rolling with for the most part. And then, of course, like I said, Alexander Nikishin got a couple games in the playoffs, but you are definitely excited to see what he can do with a full offseason in Raleigh, coming back, going through a full training camp and all that stuff, trying to learn some English, kind of understand what's going on the ice. Then you get excited for him. And then it goes into, is Scott Morrow that sixth defenseman? Is he going to be with the team as well? Then it goes into who, if Nikishin and Morrow both make it, what do the pairings look like? Does it go back to, like I said, is it Chatfield Slavin, or is it Walker Slavin? And then whoever's there, is it going to be one of those two guys with Alexander Nikishin? Or is it going to be, and then is it going to be Gossespear and Morrow? Or is it going to be, Morrow and Slavin? Or probably not that, but you get my point, is like, where do you kind of work into that? I think if you're looking at Jacob Slavin, it's either going to be Chatfield or Walker is going to be with him. And then you kind of just figure out who's going to be with who in terms of the other pairings, if it's going to be Nikishin and Morrow. That's kind of one of the big question marks. But at least for the state of the defense as of right now, it's still, I would think, probably a top 15 defense, even with Morrow and Walker in there, or Morrow and Nikishin in there, just because of the fact you've got Jacob Slavin, who's the best defensive defenseman, Jalen Chatfield, who's legitimately made himself a top four defenseman in the NHL in terms of being on a roster, and someone who plays very, very well, especially with the Carolina Hurricanes, who I could see, if they feel comfortable, putting him on that top pair with Slavin, or put him on that second pairing, at least, again, depending on how all that works out. And then, of course, like I said, you got Gossespear coming back for a second year of his deal. You know what you got of him, power play one quarterback. Hopefully he stays healthier this year, and I think he builds off of this past season and just has another great year with Carolina. And then you got Sean Walker. He went through his first full season with the team, got better as the season went along, had a very underrated playoffs, all things considered, and I'm excited to see what Sean Walker can do in season 2 of his contract with the Kings, because he's got 4 more years left, including the one coming up. And that's just your top 4. Like I said, then you got the excitement of Alexander Nikishin, see what the full regular off season is like for him, getting ready for the start of the season, and see what he can do in 25-26. And then just comes down to the question mark of Scott Morrow. Is he going to be the guy that comes into the lineup as well as a rookie along with Nikishin? Or is this going to be more of an external move? And if that's the case, where do we go from there? So That being said, stick around and we'll look more at, is this internal or external when it comes to the defense on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And it just comes up to who is getting hot at the right moment, who's making those big moments matter, and how can you track it? Well, follow the trends, and maybe it'll help you fix your next bet. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Like I said, we talked about the state of the defense, who's going to be on it, if this is the defense they roll with for next season for the Canes. If, is it going to be more of internal, just keeping with the guys they have now, or could this be external? And this is, like I said, this is where we set up with the Hurricanes as of right now. Like I said, you got $18.037 million in cap, takes up 18.9%. Like I said, you got Slavin signed through 32-33, Sean Walker through 28-29, and then you got Gostisbehere and Sheffield through 26-27. And then this upcoming season is the last year of the ELCs for Nikishin and Morrow. Outside of that, if we're looking more internal, who else has the potential to come up on the defense? Joel Nystrom in his last year of his ELC. Charles Alexis Legault's got 2 more years of his. Bryce Montgomery has 2 more. Definitely spent a lot more time with the Bloomington Bison. Of course, now we got the Greensboro Gargoyles in the ECHL. We'll see how that goes. Dominic Bandicka is 19 years old. He still has 3 years of his ELC, and Alexi Himosami is going into the last year of his ELC as well. And with Nystrom and Himosami, they'll both be RFAs after this upcoming season, but Nystrom is a arbitration-eligible player. Other than that, Joakim Ryan's unrestricted, Riley Stillman's unrestricted, and then it's Ty Smith, Anthony Honka, and Dominic Fensore, all RFAs, and all of them are arbitration-eligible, and Ronan Seeley also an RFA. So if you look internal, you really only have 5 non-roster defensemen taking up $4.339 million of the cap, and 2 of them are in the last year of their ELCs, and then you have 4 restricted free agents. 3 of them are ARB-eligible players, and your only UFAs are Ryan and Stillman. Stillman is someone you could possibly bring back, be your 7th defenseman if you really want to, and the same thing for Ty Smith, or you can just bring both of them back. One's possibly in Chicago, one's possibly a 7th defenseman for the Hurricanes. That's definitely plausible to have. And then you sign Honka, you get Fensore, you get Ronan Seeley back, then you kind of have your plethora of your defense just with those guys. And of course, the fact that the Hurricanes now have an ECHL team, now you can send all your extra players that you want to get minutes, but maybe can get it in the AHL. Well, now you can go to the ECHL and play in Greensboro right down the road, and you go check them out. And of course, you also got Simon Forsmark, Vladimir Grudin, Alexander Pevelin, Noel Franzen, Timur Kuhl, a lot of defensemen who aren't really – there are other reserve non-roster guys who are definitely playing overseas and all that stuff. Some of them have indefinite timelines to get signed. I know Simon Forsmark, he has to sign by June 1st of 2026. He's going to keep his rights. And then Noel Franzen, he has to sign by June 1st of 2028. Other than that, that's pretty much your defense. So you have 7 reserve non-roster guys, the guys you have either don't have timelines for, or you at least have a year or 2 to figure that out. And then, of course, your actual non-roster defense guys, you do have 5 of their signed, and you've got about 6 that are either going to be UFAs or RFAs, and 4 of them are the RFAs. So if you go internal, where do you look out of those guys? And I still say internal for Joakim Ryan and Riley Stillman, because technically they're still with the Canes. Their rights are still with the team because we haven't hit July 1st yet. Now, could they bring back Joakim Ryan? Possibly. Could they bring back Ryan Stillman? Also possibly. If that's the case, where do those guys go? I could definitely see Joakim Ryan maybe staying down in the AHL for more depth and stuff like that. And if you bring Riley Stillman back, like I said, there's your possible seventh defenseman on the Hurricanes. Same thing could be said if you look at Ty Smith. They got Ty Smith in that trade that brought over Jay Gensel the season before in 2023-24. They re-signed him this, through 24-25. They liked what he can do. They brought him up towards the end of the season, especially for the playoffs, as a black ace. He's another guy they can look at internally as a seventh defenseman if they keep the six they have. Then it's more, like I said, then it's just, are you looking more internal for your seventh defenseman and keeping one of those guys? And do you sign all those guys back that you already have in your system? Because, like I said, you have six guys as of right now that need to get signed. 5 are already signed. So if you sign the other 6, now you have 11 defensemen in your minor league system. You can potentially send one up to Carolina to make your seventh defenseman. Okay, then you're down to 11. Then you can figure out, okay, you keep some in Chicago for the AHL, then you possibly can send the rest down to the ECHL in Greensboro, and you're only about an hour away from Raleigh, so you could send, some of your scouts for, and just your coaches and whoever. You can go over to Greensboro and watch them live because you're only about an hour away. So there's a lot you could do with the team in that aspect if you go more internal with just re-signing guys you already have in your system. You have the 6 that you have currently right now on the roster per Puckpedia, and then you can just bring up Smith or you can bring up Stillman as your seventh defense because you know what you get out of those guys. They're going to be, performers, someone who is okay with being that extra defenseman that maybe isn't going to play every night, but still has a spot in the NHL and it still gets to be with the team in an aspect. It's almost like the playing as a backup quarterback in the NFL. You're still going to get paid. Maybe you're not the starter every game, but you're at least still there learning and growing and just being, there and being helpful when they ask upon you. So that's a possibility for a seventh defenseman. Like I said, and if this is all internal. If they go external, what does that mean then? If they're going external for their 6th defenseman, that maybe they think Scott Morrow needs more time in Chicago, well, then that's the fact of maybe you send Scott Morrow back to the AHL, give him more time with, Spyros and Anastas down there in Chicago with the Wolves, more time with, Cam Abbott than them. And then maybe you still bring up a Ty Smith or a Riley Stillman to still be your 7th defenseman. But then you look at adding an external player to fit into the roster that maybe you depending on who you get, maybe you pair them with Alexander Nikishin, or you pair them with either a Gostisbehere or a Walker or a Chatfield. It's still learn from one of those guys as well. And then you figure out who you want to put with Alexander Nikishin. So there is a lot of avenues you could go down here for the Carolina Hurricanes. If you, like I said, if you stay more internal, re-sign all the guys you already have. You bring up someone from the AHL to be your 7th defenseman. Like I said, either Smith or Stillman. Then you have your 7 defense. You bring all the other guys back, then you're basically set in Chicago for the AHL, and then you'll be set with the Gargoyles down in the ECHL over there in Greensboro. So there's your internal move. If you go external, like I said, then most likely if they think Morrow needs more time, you send Morrow back to Chicago. You still sign all the guys you need to re-sign. You put one of those 2 guys that I mentioned before as the 7th defenseman, regardless of what happens if you go more internal or external. And if you go external, like I said, then you look at where do you place this certain guy in the defensive core, and then you just find your pairings that work out with you. That turns into, like I said, Slavin Chatfield, or Slavin Walker, or Slavin and maybe whoever this new guy is that they bring back in. But then you're all set on your 6. You got your 7th D-man and a guy that's done it before, and then you give Scott Morrow more time in Chicago. Now, that being said, who are possible free agent defensemen that the Hurricanes can bring in and most likely going to be on the right side of the defense? Well, stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to a segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, like I said, we talked about the state of the defense right now. What could happen if they went external versus external when it comes to building the six that they have, seventh defenseman, race signing guys, all that stuff? Or what happens if they go external? What does that kind of look like? And if they go external, who's kind of available for the Hurricanes to look at on the defense? Well, there is a couple guys that I think could potentially be good fits for the Carolina Hurricanes that could, if they think Scott Moore needs more time in the American Hockey League with the Wolves, maybe a couple of these guys could be that option as the external sixth defenseman that could be coming in a long way as to be someone who could be a help to the Carolina Hurricanes. And one of the guys I think could be that help this past season, it fit the bill of being a guy who could potentially do something, because he played 62 games with the only played 6 for the Nashville Predators, but I still think this guy could be productive, and it is Dante Fabro. Now, Fabro had 26 points in 62 games with the Blue Jackets. Even strength ice time per game, almost 19 and a half minutes. He only got 12 minutes and 20-something seconds with the Nashville Predators, only playing in 6 games, like I said. But he was still productive, all things considered. Yeah, he did get 40 penalty minutes with the Jackets, but definitely someone who could play a game where it's more defensive than anything else, but he could still get the assist. He won't score you a ton of goals because he only had 9 this past year, but he did have 26 points. You know, if knock down the penalty minutes a little bit more, I think he's someone who could definitely fit into this roster, and it'll fit a AAV that still gives the Hurricanes a lot of cap room to go make other moves if they need to. So per AFP Analytics, Dante Fabro, the right-handed shot right defenseman, he is only 27 years old, so he still fits in within this current crop of your core. Slavin's going to be 30. You got all these other guys like Aho's 27. You know, you got Svechnikov at 25. Like I said, you also got Seth Jarvis is 23, Stade Coven's 22. Like, you have Dante Fabro is still in that good window of being around most of the core with his age. They are projecting him for a 4-year, $18.114 million contract, which the AAV only comes at a $4.528 million or $4.74 million to the cap. I think he would be an okay option if you want to go down the road of the external player, but getting a guy who's going to be making less than $5 million per season that could still play good defense, does give you a little bit of offense as well, but is another potential shutdown guy on the defense that could work really well for you. And he plays right, he's a right shot, right defenseman that fits the bill of what you're looking for, because you already have your left side of Slavin, Nikishin, Gostisbehere, and then you look at the right side of Chatfield, Walker, Fabro. That's still a decent right side that could fit in really well. Like I said, his cap would still give you the possibilities to go after other guys. Could it be a second line center? Could it be a Ehlers or a Marner or a Besser or whoever you want on the wings? You can still go get your winger that you want, or your winger and your center. You can still go get that 2C and that winger you're looking for, but you also could go get Fabro to be your external move on the defense, someone you can bring in to be on that right side. And like I said, making less than $5 million, you will definitely be glad to have that. So I think Dante Fabro is someone who could be able to put himself in a good spot to where he can fit in with the Hurricanes, not take a lot of cap, and still be someone who could be productive for you. Another guy I am looking at, he is a shot defense, but he can play on the left and the right side. He did play with the LA Kings this past season as Ferrer's.com. He actually, funny enough, got drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets at pick 159 in the 2015 draft. But this past season with the Kings, 5 goals, 30 points in 82 games, almost average 19 minutes of just even strength ice time for the Kings. And he only had 28 penalty minutes. And this is back-to-back years of 28 penalty minutes. He actually went from 23 points the season before in 77 games to where this past year played all 82 games, got 30 points with the Kings. And per AFP Analytics, his contract, yes, it's a little bit higher than Fabro's. It's a 7-year, $53.260 million contract, or the AAV comes out to $7.608 million, and the cap hit percentage, 7.97. Like I said, he's a couple years older than Fabro at 29, but that's a 7-year deal that would make sense for the Hurricanes because it fits in to what you already have with Slavin. Is, like I said, is 29, going to be 30. He already has his contract for the next 8 seasons. You adding Gavrikov puts you in that same alignment with Slavin with 1 year less. So he would be going through the 2031-32 season, where Slavin goes through the 32-33 season. And like I said, too, Gavrikov plays on both sides. So he can play left side defense or right side defense, even if he is a left shot defenseman. And here's the thing, too, though. This is what I really like about Gavrikov. He is Russian. If you bring him into this lineup, you could still roll with either Slavin Walker or Slavin Sheffield, and then you add Nikishin Gavrikov as a defensive pairing, and then you would have Gostisbehere with either Walker or Sheffield, depending on who you put with Slavin. But you add Gavrikov, that's a great transition to help a new kid who's 23 years old, still speaks mainly Russian, speaks very broken English, very limited, but he's someone who's been in the league for a while, has a good grasp of English, can help him learn English, help him learn the system that the Hurricanes play, and still give him the comfortability to be like, hey, maybe I'm not there yet with my English. I can still talk to you in Russian, and we can still communicate what we need to do on the defense. So that's that good progression to help a young defenseman learn this system for a guy who speaks good English and it can speak Russian to him to help translate what's going on and help him build his English on top of that as well. So there's a lot of good positives with Gavrikov. And like I said, that's not even talking about for the fact that he had a plus 26 for the Kings this past season, which is only second on the team behind Warren Fogle at plus 36. You're adding a good, solid defenseman in Gavrikov who could really help out a more forward shooting, offensively minded Nikishin. You add a defensive guy like Gavrikov onto the line. Now you got a kid, so you got Nikishin who's going to push to score goals and put up points, but you got Gavrikov who can still put up points, but also can play solid defense as well on that right side. So like I said, you could have a defense of Slavin with either Walker Chatfield, then it's going to be Nikishin Gavrikov, and then it's a combination of Gostisbehere and either Walker or Chatfield. You are setting yourself up to have a fantastic top 6 if that's the way you go down. So if you ask me, I think the top 2 defensemen the Hurricanes could look at in free agency, if this is the external move they go with, give me Dante Fabro, who can still play good defense for you, but gives you a smaller cap hit of 4.6 to 4.8, maybe $5 million towards the cap on 4 years, because he is 27, so you're only requiring for 4 years out of him. Or do you go for the bigger cap hit in Gavrikov that's maybe around 7.5, 7.6, maybe even $7.7 million for 7 seasons? But you're talking another structured defensive defenseman who could give you options on the left and right side, help you build Nikishin's confidence, be the translator for him, help him learn English, but still let him be really offensively minded. And you've got another great defensive defenseman that can slide in behind, Jacob Slavin, because Slavin on the right side, Gavrikov on your right side. Now you got 2 really structured defensive defensemen in your roster. So there is a lot of ways the Hurricanes could go down here, but either way, internally, the Hurricanes are going to be fine. If they go external and add maybe Faber or Gavrikov, I think it takes them to another level. But all things considered, this still is a top 15 defense in the league for the Carolina Hurricanes, even if they don't go external and just go all internal on the defense this season. So it will definitely be interesting come July 1st if the Hurricanes stay more internal or will they go external. Guys, this will be a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen. Your second listen, let's go check out the Locked On AHL podcast. There is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On AHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where I do have link trees in my bios to where you find all of my rated content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcast, well, it's the Surgecast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to subscribe or follow and leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs so they become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Everyone enjoy your Wednesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.